part of the anxiety came from that. And part of the three Ps came from the anxiety. Like they just fed each other. And for me, I definitely see in my crowd, even if it's not clinically diagnosed, just the tendency to worry, to be anxious, to become stressed out over not doing it right, not doing it good enough, then looking back at the day and kind of chastising yourself, like, I should have done this, I should have done that, this wasn't as good as it could have been, now I have to do this tomorrow. And that cycle just continues to repeat. And often I find in women, especially after childbearing years, many of them end up being diagnosed with anxiety because they've now put themselves almost in this rinse and repeat cycle, and they don't know how to get out of it.
Everything is working out for me. It's working out for you, too. It just takes believing that it is. We can have, be, and do anything. The key is to care about how you feel and choose to feel good right now. Hey guys, I'm here today with Dawn Calvinisti, and we are going to talk about something that she talks about on her podcast, Imperfection in Progress, and that is the 3 Ps. I'll let Dawn tell you. Dawn, thanks for being on the show. Can you introduce yourself and tell everybody about the 3 Ps that we're going to be talking about today?
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me here. So the 3 Ps that I talk about are people-pleasing, perfectionism, and procrastination, and they all really do fall under perfectionism. But that is kind of my wheelhouse and my jam and what I have worked with through my life. And yeah, I'm, I guess, on the other side of it now, but of course, everything always comes back when there's triggers and so on.
Ain't that the truth? I know. I was talking with someone else recently who said that she is a recovered perfectionist. And I thought, oh, are you ever fully over that? Because every now and again, it seems to rear its ugly head again. And you're like, oh, I just want this to be perfect.
That's right. I don't think it ever truly goes away, any of these things. I think everything that we work on, they're just things that we become more aware of, right? And so then we're quicker at catching ourselves, we're quicker at using our tools and committing to, working to not let the shadow side of those things pull us down. And so I think that's just, part of growth. And as long as you're willing to continue working through when they do show up, then it's no big deal, really.
Yeah, that's true. And so that's what you do. You talk about on your podcast. These are tips and tools about the 3 Ps and how people can live their best life when they know that those things are coming up in their life and they want to address it. Is that an accurate statement?
Yeah. And I think I always have a guest each week. And a lot of times it's female entrepreneurs who have worked through some of these or are still working through some of these. And so we get to hear what's worked for them and what kind of creeps up in their lives over and over and why and how they use them to also propel themselves forward, because all 3 of these have some really great advantages as well.
Yeah. Okay, well, let's give everybody kind of just an introduction into perfectionism, people-pleasing, and procrastination, and why you think that holds people back.
Yeah, I think in my particular community, I find that the majority are what I would call perfectionists or high performers. And a lot of times when you are a high performer, you have really a great need to do your very best and put out, the most complete, perfect form of whatever it is that you're doing, which again is not a bad thing. The problem that we see in that is that it then can cause you to freeze, to feel like you have to constantly compare to those around you, to check if you are up to standard. And then if you're not, it causes you to procrastinate, because if you can't put out the absolute best, then you don't put anything out at all. Or it causes you to people please, because I want to make sure that everybody that's looking at me is going to think that what I'm doing is good, is, what they want, is what they think of me, lines up with what I want them to think of me or what I think I want them to think of me. So it's all of that end of it too.
So I'm getting like visions of elementary school, because I feel like this stuff maybe started developing for me, because I'm relating as you're talking, like, oh yeah, I've done that and I relate with that. But do you feel like it starts in childhood? I mean, most kids don't have this coming in, right? Is this a learned behavior?
Yeah, for sure this is learned, nurtured, that type of behavior. I know for me too, I agree. It started very early in public school, started within my family as well. Most of the people that I speak to for sure is very, very young, learned behavior in life. And it's just the norm, right? It's the norm. It's most of the time, if, until people become more aware, they don't even realize that other people aren't like that. Right? Doesn't everybody want to do their best? Doesn't everybody feel that way about getting things done? Doesn't everybody feel it has to be exact? And so it is really interesting watching them realize, oh, well, that's why I butt heads so much with my boss, or that's why I butt heads with my spouse, or whatever, because no, not everybody does think like that. And that's just a belief system that you were raised through, or developed as developed your peer group, or within your family of origin or whatever. But yeah, it definitely is interesting that it is a very young learned behavior.
So I had an experience the other day that made me think of you after we had these conversations, because I was having one of those days on the weekend where it was kind of like a deep clean the house kind of day. And I wanted to get a bunch of different things done, wash the sheets and mop the floor, that kind of thing. And I have this thing where I can't rest until it's all done. And I was getting all stressed out because time was getting later and later in the day and I hadn't eaten, but I couldn't stop because I wanted to get it done first, because I feel like I can't rest until it's done. And my 7-year-old, he's so wise. He said, Mom, you just have to take a break and feel better and then go back to it. It's okay. And I was like, you know what? I can't even deny, like, you're right. That would have been a better way to go, because here I am now all stressed out and tight. And I'm like, I need your help with this, or, all angry and upset at my family because of these chores I wanted to get done. What's your perspective on that kind of thing?
Well, first of all, what a wise kid you're raising.
I
But,
know. He impresses me.
but secondly, it's all about expectation, right? Or perceived expectation. And I think when we feel like things have to be done a certain way, I'll tell you where this comes out often. A new mom, and she starts, however she's going to do her day with the baby, and how the baby needs to be looked after and cared for and changed and fed and all those parts. And dad comes in and offers to do something. The moment that he doesn't do it her way, she steps in and takes away his ability to do anything, but then will complain later that he never wants to help.
It's so true.
Right? Because we think we have the one and only right, perfect way. When the reality is there could be 20 ways to do that thing. But if we believe that, from a perfectionist standpoint, that our way is the best, right, whatever you want to term it, way, we can't let go of it. So like you were in this weekend, this had to be done to this degree and in this manner and in this time period. And this is all of the things that you need to get done in order to feel like you did it right.
And it had to be done by me, so it was done
Yes.
that way.
Right. Right. And when something is falling apart, right, or it's not going on in the manner you want and the timing you want, it's whatever, then we start to stress and our shoulders are at our ears and we're feeling
Yep.
totally upset and frustrated. And then we're lashing out at other people because they're just sitting there not seeming to notice that obviously we're falling behind. And can they not step in? What is the matter with them? Right? Can they not see that this has to happen right now, just like this? Right? And of course, that's not the case, but we get so deep into the belief of how we set it out at the very beginning that we are unable to pivot, to be able to pause, to be able to pull back and say, this isn't working. How could I do this in a way that I'm going to feel good?
Well, and I feel like the root of that perfectionism is, if it's not done a certain way, I'm going to be anxious about it because I can't feel good about it unless it's done this way. And anxiety is something that you're very familiar with.
Yes.
So can you tell everybody a little bit about that journey?
Yeah. So for me, part of my discovery of the people pleasing, the perfectionism, the procrastination came through anxiety. Like clinically diagnosed anxiety. And part of part of the anxiety came from that, and part of the three P's came from the anxiety. Like they just fed each other. And for me, I definitely see in my crowd, even if it's not clinically diagnosed, just the tendency to worry, to be anxious, to become stressed out over not doing it right, not doing it good enough, then looking back at the day and kind of chastising yourself, like, I should have done this, I should have done that, this wasn't as good as it could have been, now I have to do this tomorrow. And that cycle just continues to repeat. And often I find in women, especially after childbearing years, many of them end up being diagnosed with anxiety because they've now put themselves almost in this rinse and repeat cycle, and they don't know how to get out of it.
Yeah. For me, I became aware of my inner dialogue, which was not very nice, and really holding myself to a standard that I couldn't reach. I was always pushing myself to be the best and not allowing myself any leeway to rest and take care of what felt good to me at that time. And that does leave you in an anxious state.
Absolutely. For me, I lived in a state of anxious guilt, I would call it, where at the, after something had happened, I would replay it and replay it and replay it. Like, I should have said this. I could have done that. This might have helped me avoid it. And I would build out all these different scenarios that may or may never have worked to make it any better than it was. But basically making myself feel like I'm not good enough. I didn't do it right. Here I am again, blowing it. When am I ever going to do it perfectly? I just can't measure up. And that would just start the whole anxiety of, I'm not good enough. I need to go and apologize to that person. I didn't do what they thought I should have done. This is all my fault.
Once you knew that was happening, how were you able to pivot that?
So for me, there was three main tools that really, really changed everything for me. And I still use them to this day. But number one was breathing. So funny that breathing was just the most basic, simple thing. But I learned early on, early on for me, but it was probably 2 years into the anxiety, that when I get anxious, these are all the body symptoms that come with it, right? So all the fight and flight response, the heart palpitations, the breathing really fast, the sweat, my stomach starts gurgling, all of those things. And the one thing that I knew after, researching was, if I can get my body to calm down, then those symptoms are going to stop and my mind will follow. And so I would start to breathe, and I would literally count 1, 1,000, 2, 1,000, breathing in and breathing out with a pause at the top. And that was the first thing that I noticed stopped my brain from racing in those circles and the conversation to slow down. And like you said, it was never a very nice conversation going on. So that was awesome. And then the second thing for me was starting to learn that I could tell myself different things that would also cause that to happen. And my favorite phrase always was, it's just anxiety. I won't die from it, and it goes away. So I would literally, I would be repeating that on, repeat over and over and over, because it was true. And knowing that it wouldn't ramp up forever, it would eventually calm itself down, was such a peace. And so that really helped me as well. And then the third thing for me was getting busy. So even if I would wake up, because I often would wake up with panic attacks in the middle of the night, I would wake up, I would get out of bed and go do something. And I am somebody who does not enjoy cleaning, but I learned in the middle of the night that cleaning out a drawer or folding things in the closet was enough to give the adrenaline some place to go to help me calm down again. So those were my three things at the beginning that even now, if I even notice I'm a little anxious, even for good reasons, breathing is the number one that I go to.
Which is so kind of cliche, right? People are like, oh yeah, sure, deep breaths. But the thing about cliches is that they're there because it works. It really is something that works for a lot of people. And most of us just don't take the time to go, okay, I'm just going to take some deep breaths. But it does. It slows your heart rate down. It brings you back to center. It grounds you. And it allows your mind, if you focus on the breathing, to get out of your head and stop those ruminating thoughts, which are really harmful to your state of being. So I love that. I love that breathing is the go-to. I just want to share with everybody so they understand that your diagnosis of anxiety was severe to the point of agoraphobia. So you didn't even want to leave the house. I mean, this is drastic in your life. This is debilitating.
Yes, I had just had my second son when it was to that degree. And what my life was like is that every day was generalized anxiety. Like there really was no time that I didn't feel anxious day or night, and multiple panic attacks, sometimes upward of 15 in a day. And then to the point where every time I left the house, I was afraid that I would make a fool of myself having a panic attack. And so just started to isolate and stay home more and more as much as I could. I mean, I did have two kids. There were things I had to do, but if I didn't have to or I could get out of it, absolutely I would avoid.
So you really didn't have much of a social life. You weren't going and hanging out with people, going to coffee shops, things like that.
No. Like I remember very specifically my husband and I deciding that we were going to go to a bookstore. And for me, that was a peaceful place to be able to sit in a bookshop, drink a tea, browse some magazines, whatever. And I remember being there and having a panic attack and grabbing him by the arm and dragging him to the car and then saying, like, we can't ever go there again.
Wow, that's impactful. But now things are different. So you've really worked on your anxiety and you've overcome it. And so now do you do things like that? Do you go to the bookstore? Do you go out? Do you hang out with people?
Would you like to have an ad-free experience? I know you probably have my intro and my outro memorized by now, and maybe you just kind of want to cut out that ad space, this one right now that you're listening to, so that you can just get all of the content of the episode. Well, if that does sound like something that you're interested in, I've put together a Patreon account, and I'm offering all of the episodes I've recorded so far without that extra stuff, so you just get the content. And I'm also going to be offering members early access to the newly released episodes. So I'll be putting those on Patreon several days before the episode releases on all the other podcast platforms. So you'll be able to listen before everybody else. You can find the link to the Patreon in the show notes. And I'm also going to post on social media, so you should be able to find it on all of my pages there as well. I look forward to getting to know all of you guys better and engaging in some co-creating together. For now, I'll just get back to the episode. See you on Patreon.
Yeah, I don't have any, I would say anxiety for me is what would be anxiety for anybody if there was an anxious actual situation happening.
Like a normal response to a situation.
Exactly. Whereas anxiety before, no idea where it was coming from, just kind of hit out of the blue. So I don't deal with that anymore. There's definitely times and triggers, just like when we were talking about the 3 Ps, there's things that can trigger you because they're things that have been in your life often or on repeat, right? That can bring the feeling up. But now I know where anxiety starts for me. I know exactly in my body where I first feel it. And breathing comes in right away, and that pretty much ends it. And again, it didn't happen overnight. This was years of work and becoming very aware both of my body physically, of my mental thoughts, working on changing those thoughts, learning to change that perfectionistic behavior and thinking and belief and the people pleasing for sure. And all of that really is what created longer and longer lapses between anxious thoughts and anxious feelings.
So you said that it was just generalized anxiety and you don't know where it came from. So you never did get to the root of what was causing it, but you were still able to overcome it.
Yes. I mean, I think there are things for sure in my life that made me more anxious than other people. And there are definitely circumstances in my life that helped to make me that person. But I couldn't tell you when anxiety hit or a panic attack hit, it wasn't because this just happened and now I'm panicking 95% of the time. And so it was just a part of life.
I love that because that's kind of my position on mental health treatment. And I don't really believe that you have to get to the root of something in order to improve your life. I think a lot of times rehashing all of that stuff just contributes to the problem. So I love so much that you were able to you really took kind of a biological approach to it, because that's where you start to sense it first. You start to feel anxiety in your body, and then you intervened with a physical intervention in order to calm yourself down, at which point you can then start addressing the thoughts and turning that around. I think that's a really good approach. And I'm hoping that people that are listening who have anxiety, which is a terrible feeling. I mean, anxiety is awful. As soon as you feel it, you want to not feel it ever again. It's a horrible feeling. I'm speaking from experience, but having those tools to start implementing that now, you don't have to go to therapy and hash it all out. You can start doing this for yourself.
Yes, and I can definitely tell you, like, I went to therapy. I did those things, and for me, it made it worse. And so I know some people it might make it better. For me, because we were digging and digging, and there was really, in my opinion, looking back, there was nothing to pull from. We were kind of just trying to find whatever we could peg it on. And I think for me, knowing that there were things in my life that just made me feel unstable and anxious, and when I was very, very young, made it hard for me to feel secure throughout life. And so anxiety was just easier. It came quicker. The thoughts came more easily that something was my fault, again, because of my upbringing. And so, if your thoughts are ramping up whatever emotions you're having, then those have to be worked on. And I think once again, you become more aware. I definitely, kept a journal, wrote down things that I thought maybe this is something, maybe this is something. But what I really looked for was a pattern. And once I could see patterns of, blaming myself, feelings of unworthiness, not being good enough, not being perfect enough, then I started to realize, okay, this is an area that is not serving me. And I need to really look at how can I change that thought process.
Well, vibrationally speaking, it makes sense. Wherever you leave your vibration last on a thought, that's where you pick it up the next time. So if you're having these repeating thoughts, then as soon as you go there, that's how you feel again. And what you're doing when you intervene is you're changing your vibrational reaction to the stimulus. So here comes that thought again. Oh my gosh, I feel anxious. I'm going to take some breaths now. And then I'm going to look at my thoughts and I'm going to try and turn it around. And that's how you clean it up. And over time with doing that, you completely overcome it. It's a beautiful thing. I'm very impressed that you were able to do that. And this didn't come from advice from anyone else. This came from your own inner guidance.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely looked around. I read books, I watched videos, I did the things. But I think the reality is only we can really know what feels right for us. Like, just intuitively, I think when something feels like it's off, it's off. And when something feels like, this is going in the right direction, let's follow the breadcrumbs. And so I think that's kind of what led me was, okay, just keep following the things that seem to be leading out of this hole.
I want to talk a little bit more about expectations because that's something that you and I aligned on. When we consider expectations that we're setting, how do you think that relates with the 3 Ps?
So I think every time that we choose an expectation, right, whether it's one that we ourselves are putting on or one that we've picked up from somebody else, right? Because again, it could be that you truly believe that this is the way and this is how things need to be done, or it can be that you've heard something, right? You perceived something, and it might not even be true, which is the most ridiculous of all of it, right? Is, that woman looked at me like that when I did this, therefore I should never do that like that again. I better do it like this, right? Meanwhile, she looked at you like that because she had something in her eye, right? So,
right, or a thought that she had about something
exactly,
else.
or remembered something or whatever. But the bottom line is, as soon as we decide to pick up that expectation and take it to be truth, that this is how it should be, and this is how I need to react according to that, we've given all power and all ability for us to actually be authentic in what we think, what we believe, how we process, what we want to put out to the world. And we've given all power to the expectation. And it's very detrimental because we start to live somebody else's belief system, or if we put it on ourselves, again, it's still a perceived feeling because of something on the outside. It's never internal. And so we lose our intuitive abilities. We lose our abilities to hear, right? Inside ourselves. And so we really do give so much power over as soon as we decide to go with an expectation.
I agree. I think that expectations are very powerful. It's up there with setting intentions. But when you are aware of an expectation you have, now you're anticipating it being a certain way. And a lot of times people feel validated when then that thing happens, which is usually a negative thing, right? They're like, see, I told you it was going to happen. And then it happened. But really, most people don't understand that that's creation, because you were offering a vibration in relationship to that expectation, and now you are anticipating it, and the universe is saying, okay, this is the vibration you have, let me give it to you. So really, that negative thing that happened is part of your creation process. It's not that you were right about it. It really is kind of a responsibility, which is kind of an icky thing when you think about it. A lot of people don't want to accept that for the bad stuff, but it happens for the good stuff too.
Absolutely. And I think it's interesting when people talk about manifesting, because expectations manifest. And, many times people just think, well, I'm doing this because it's what's best, right? It's that perfectionist coming out. I'm doing this because it's the right way. I'm doing this because this is how people want this to be done. This is how they, always have done it. But there's a lot of shoulds under expectations, right? Which is really not because it's the best thing. And yet that's how we say we're doing it. It's for the best.
Yeah, I mean, it really is kind of a deliberate process to line up your expectations with what you really do want and stop looking at things the way that they are. That really is the difference between creating by default and manifesting by default, or creating and manifesting deliberately. If you're going, oh no, this is going to happen. Say it's your kid riding their bike. Oh, they're going to fall or whatever. You're anticipating something negative. Well, you're still lining up with that vibration. That's not really what you want. And that's the part. That's the part where if we hone in on that and we get really good at lining up with the expectations of the things we want and let go with that feeling of being right. Because a lot of times that's really not serving our purpose.
That's right. And expectation, the feeling of expectation is usually a really good thing. Like when you're expecting something, when you're waiting, when there's that desire and that joy about like it's coming, that is an awesome thing. But when it's something being put on, right, an expectation that's being put on someone or on yourself, that's the negative end of it. So like everything, it's dual, but you really do have to look at it when you're talking about expectations. And I think a lot of times it is very subconscious. It's so deep in there that you don't even realize you do it like that because you expect an end result that you're actually trying to manipulate somebody into often when it's put on somebody else. And so again, is that really your desire?
I feel like I have to be really careful with that with my kids, putting my expectations onto them when they have their own energy and really, which is a lot cleaner than mine because they just came in a lot sooner than I did. But I'm over here trying not to muddle it up by putting my expectations on them. What can you speak to that? How do you maintain your own expectations and not impose it on other people?
Oh, this is a big question. And I struggle with this because again, that perfectionism, I want to show them like, but if you just do it this way, right?
Right?
Get this outcome and it's the right outcome. So I feel you as a mom. One thing I've learned, I mean, I have 3 kids and my oldest is almost 20 and my youngest is almost 12. And by the time we hit the youngest, I feel like we're doing it much, much better. And my oldest is, she's the one we're paying the broken dishes. But it's great because she can see it too, and it's awesome. But I think the one thing that when you're looking at whether it's your children, a friend, a sister, anybody that having you're having the best desire for, right? This is an intention where you want the best for them. It's not, you're not trying to thwart their plans or,
Right.
you
Yeah.
deliberately manipulate their plans generally. But when we're looking at somebody else, I think the one thing to keep in mind when it comes to expectation, and you go to tell them how to do something. This is the easiest way for me to explain it. You go to tell them how to do something. Before you do that, watch how they're doing it and ask them why they do it like that.
Well, that's brilliant.
I have learned more from my youngest daughter, and I have changed my methods because she's brilliant. And I never allowed my oldest children to speak, to tell me why they were doing it. Doesn't mean it's always the best way. And sometimes my way is better, and I do have to help them learn a different method.
Yeah, that's parenting.
Yeah. But when you're curious and you can say, so why do you do it like that? Why do you hold the crayon like that? Why do you choose to start this first? Why is it that you don't do the dishes right after you finish eating, right? Like whatever it is,
Oh.
why do all your socks end up in the couch cushions? Whatever it is, they do have a reason. And I've had times where we've actually went through a bit of a process because it's like, I don't know. Okay, so you don't know, but if you did know, what do you think it is? Right. And just having those conversations can really open up, number one, how your kids think or how the other person thinks, what they think is important, what isn't important to them, what ways they prefer to work, what methods work for them, what lights them up. Right. So it gives so much back when you don't just step in with your expectation and correct it or fix it or change the manner. It's so awesome. And I'm glad that we learned that eventually. But like I said, the first two, we're now trying to do that with them.
Well, it's okay. You got to start somewhere. As I was listening to you, I started thinking that this makes so much sense because we're always expanding. That's the whole purpose of life, is for us to expand. And it would make sense that the way we've been doing it all along is not always going to be the best way. So where do we look to know what the next best way is going to be? To the next generation. Those new souls that are coming in, those are the ones that are going to be the expansion. So brilliant. That's just brilliant.
It's so much fun when you can get out of your own way, right? Whatever the areas you're working on. But definitely with perfection, with people pleasing, with procrastination, if those are things that are holding up your life, if those are things that stop you from moving forward, or they're things that you get uncomfortable when somebody tells you you need to do it differently, right? If somebody tries to impose their way on you and you can't handle that, like on the weekend when your son so nicely showed you that maybe taking a break and coming back at it would be a great idea. If you can't see that in the moment, right? Or if it feels like, I know, but those are the times where like literally stepping back and sitting down and saying, why? Like, be curious. Why? Why do I feel the need to do it like this? What is it in me that won't rest until it's done this way? I think often those answers that come to us, they're deep, they're back, they're when we're 5, 6, 3, whatever. And there'll be many instances, I'm sure, as you start to recognize this is where this comes from. And in any of these instances, was it a good feeling? And I would almost guarantee none of them were. So then we can start letting go when we realize, oh, okay, wait, I'm hanging on to something that actually hasn't been a good feeling in my life. Let's make that change.
I love that. Do you do coaching?
Yes. Yeah. I coach individual and group as well.
Okay. Well, I think that now would be a good time to tell everybody how they could get in contact with you and for coaching, and let's tell them about the podcast, just all your areas. Let's have the spiel.
Yeah. So the easiest place to get to all of the areas is just going to my website. So pursueprogress.com. On Instagram, I'm Pursue Progress with Dawn. And really, mostly what I love to work through is with ambitious women who are looking to make change in those 3 Ps. And often anxiety is along with those. It seems to show up in my people, but those are kind of the big areas that show up for me. And then the Imperfection in Progress podcast, you can look it up, or again, it's on my website. You can find it there as well.
And I'll make sure and put everything on the Dr. Williams podcast social media pages and check out the show notes in order to find all the ways that you can connect with Dawn and work with her. This has been an amazing conversation. I really appreciate you sharing your personal journey with anxiety and how you came to have this career focus with helping other women. Thanks for sharing your insights. There's more on the podcast. I hope you guys will go and listen. And I'm a guest in one of her episodes, so you can go over there and listen to that one too. Thanks for being here today and sharing yourself with my audience.
Thank you so much for having me. I had a great time.
If you're enjoying the podcast, you can show your support by leaving a rating and a review on your favorite podcast platform. You also can follow Dr. Williams' podcast on all social media platforms and subscribe on YouTube and by going to www.drwilliamspodcast.com. Deliberate creation is the key to living life satisfied, and that is my wish for all of you.